The day had started like any other, but the storm began brewing as soon as the new girl walked into the classroom. Jasmine King stepped through the doorway of Jefferson High's 11th grade English class, her curls bouncing with each step and her face carrying a quiet defiance. Her dark skin seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights, drawing attention she hadn't asked for. She tightened her grip on her backpack strap as eyes followed her across the room. The whispers had started even before she sat down. "She's from the South Side, isn't she?" one girl murmured to her friend, loud enough for Jasmine to hear. "Yeah, my brother says they let anybody in now," another chimed in, her voice dripping with contempt. Jasmine ignored them, her gaze steady as she found an empty desk near the back of the room. It was a spot deliberately left open by the other students, a silent marker of the social hierarchy. She wasn't stupid. She'd seen this before. She knew where she stood in a school where the majority of faces were pale, and hers was one of the few that wasn't. At the front of the room, Miss Warner, the English teacher, stood with her arms crossed. She was an older woman with sharp features and an expression that rarely softened. When Jasmine sat down, Miss Warner's eyes flicked to her like a hawk spotting prey. "Miss King, I presume," she said, her voice clipped and formal, carrying the tone of someone who had already decided something about her. "Yes, ma'am," Jasmine said quietly but firmly. "Well," Miss Warner continued, "I hope you're prepared to keep up. My class isn't exactly easy, and I don't tolerate laziness." The words weren't new to Jasmine. They were the same she'd heard all her life in one form or another. Laziness. A word often thrown her way before anyone even got to know her. Her jaw tightened, but she nodded. "I'll do my best." The class continued, but the air was heavy with unspoken tension. Miss Warner lectured about literary themes, her focus today on Romeo and Juliet. As she spoke about forbidden love, Jasmine felt the teacher's gaze land on her more than once, as if daring her to speak, to challenge her authority. At lunch, Jasmine sat alone at the edge of the courtyard. She wasn't in the mood to deal with stares or whispers. She pulled a sandwich from her bag and opened her notebook, jotting down poetry, a habit she'd developed to escape the weight of the world around her. "You write?" a voice asked, breaking her concentration. She looked up to see Malik Henderson, one of the few other black students at Jefferson High. He was tall, with a deep brown complexion and a confident smile that made him stand out. He wore a varsity jacket, the kind that usually symbolized popularity, but Jasmine noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah," she said cautiously. "Why?" Malik shrugged and sat down across from her without waiting for an invitation. "Just curious. Not a lot of people around here bother to look like they care about anything." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "You mean black people?" Malik's smile faltered for a moment, and then he chuckled softly. "You don't hold back, do you?" "No point," she replied, closing her notebook. "Not here." For a moment, they sat in silence. Jasmine didn't know what to make of him. He was charming, sure, but she'd learned not to trust people too easily. She'd been burned before, friendships that turned out to be traps, alliances that crumbled under pressure. "You're different," Malik said finally. "Yeah, I get that a lot," Jasmine said, her tone edged with sarcasm. "No, I mean it in a good way," Malik insisted. "Most people here just fit in. You don't seem like you care about that." Jasmine shrugged. "What's the point? They've already decided who I am." Malik leaned forward, his expression serious now. "That doesn't mean they're right." His words hung in the air between them, and for the first time that day, Jasmine felt a crack in her defenses. Maybe Malik wasn't like the others. Maybe he understood what it was like to carry the weight of other people's expectations and prejudices. Over the next few weeks, Malik and Jasmine grew closer. They sat together at lunch, shared notes in class, and talked about everything from music to their shared experiences of racism at Jefferson High. Malik told her about the subtle ways he'd been excluded from certain groups, how teachers assumed he wasn't as smart as his white peers despite his straight A's. Jasmine shared her poetry with him, revealing the depths of her frustrations and dreams. But not everyone was happy about their growing friendship. "Careful, Malik," one of his football teammates said one day. "People are starting to talk." "About what?" Malik asked, his voice sharp. "You know, about you and her." The boy gestured vaguely, but his meaning was clear. Malik's jaw tightened. Maybe they should mind their own business. The pressure didn't stop there. Miss Warner began calling on Jasmine more frequently in class, her questions always loaded, as if she were trying to catch her in a mistake. When Jasmine answered correctly, Miss Warner's lips would tighten and she'd move on without acknowledgement. One day, after Jasmine delivered a particularly eloquent analysis of a Shakespearean sonnet, Miss Warner couldn't hold back. "Well, Miss King," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "it seems you've surprised us all. I didn't expect such insight from someone with your background." The class fell silent. Jasmine felt her cheeks burn, but she refused to look down. "What do you mean by that, Miss Warner?" she asked, her voice steady. Miss Warner hesitated for a moment, clearly caught off guard by the direct challenge. "I just mean, given that you're new here, it's impressive." But everyone in the room knew what she really meant. Malik clenched his fists under the desk, his anger barely contained. After class, he found Jasmine by her locker. "You okay?" he asked. Jasmine nodded, but her eyes were glassy with unshed tears. "I'm used to it." "You shouldn't have to be," Malik said firmly. That evening, Malik and Jasmine sat on the bleachers of the empty football field. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Malik reached for her hand and she let him. "Do you ever feel like you don't belong anywhere?" she asked softly. "All the time," Malik admitted, "but being with you, it makes it easier." Jasmine looked at him, her heart pounding. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not as a stereotype, not as an outsider, but as herself. Their relationship blossomed, but it wasn't without challenges. The stares grew more pointed, the whispers louder. Ms. Warner became even harsher toward Jasmine, and Malik's teammates began to isolate him. But they didn't care. Together they found strength in each other, pushing back against the small-mindedness that surrounded them. Jasmine's poetry became bolder, her words cutting through the lies and prejudice like a blade. Malik began speaking out, challenging teachers and students alike when they crossed the line. In the end, they knew they couldn't change everyone's mind. But they didn't need to. They had each other, and that was enough.